here with Benny on the next AMA. All right, so Benny, before we start this AMA, I just want you to kind of give a brief, explanation of who you are and what you do here at Void.
Yeah, sure thing. So, yeah, name's Benedict, Benny, Ben, whatever you want to call me, really. But I'm one of the co-founders of Voy, alongside Shanti, Bill, and Chris, and I am essentially the chief ecosystem officer. So, in charge of kind of all things to do with growing the ecosystem and all things sort of external, I suppose, from the ecosystem, whether that's sort of partnerships with centralized exchanges or the projects that are internal, or even the community itself. So quite an all-encompassing role, but yeah, really enjoying it. And if anyone does ever want to have a chat with me, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome for that excellent explanation here, Benny. Well, while we wait for people to join, we get to cooking. I got a couple questions here for you. So let me see here. All right, I had to get the paste ready. All right, so it shows up on here. When working on the idea, the idea void with the other founders, what were some of the other ideas you took, inspirations you took from other blockchains and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think fundamentally, one of the big drivers of Voy was actually living up to the promise of Web3, right? Like there was this dream of it being decentralized and users having governance and ownership over the network. And we've seen that with things like Bitcoin, but it's hard to find it elsewhere. So honestly, probably Bitcoin was one of the biggest inspirations, if you will, just in terms of setting the vision and the mission of what we're actually trying to achieve here, and really just making sure that we're building something that will be owned, run, and built by the community. There's loads of other facets that we've sort of picked from other networks as well, or just been inspired through whether more recent ones or whether older ones. Just the success of Ethereum is a great one to point at as well. But obviously, the technology, the AVM from Algorand has obviously been a big influence for us. We wanted to pick the best technology fundamentally when we were thinking about doing this. We could have picked any tech. We could have done an Ethereum L2 or an Ethereum L1, but we thought, no, the AVM, the Algorand consensus is the best tech out there. Why would we pick anything else? So obviously very heavily inspired by that. And honestly, probably more recently, it's been interesting watching a lot of the new L1s come out of the Cosmo ecosystem. And I actually think Nibiru has been a great example of one that has had huge success out of the gate, just in the way that they've done their testnet and the way that they've sort of launched into mainnet. So we've taken a lot of inspiration from them, which our marketing team has probably more been leaning on. But honestly, lots of different places. This is a very big, thriving market, and there's lots of different L1s, even L2s, to look at and kind of get inspiration from.
Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, those are some wonderful examples. Um, I got another here, great question here for you, Benny. Realistically, how long do you think it will? No, what are some things you think Void can do to help all of Web3? Was the question I was going to ask.
Yeah, I think honestly, for me, the biggest thing that's missing within the wider ecosystem as a whole really is the interoperability. I very much believe in a multi-chain future, but to enable that, I feel like we're missing still, there are some examples of some early traction there, but we're still missing this way to connect up all the different silos of these different ecosystems. And everyone's kind of just in their own sort of silo doing their own thing. And there's not a very easy way to essentially export goods and services between these markets that these ecosystems have created. One thing we do very much want to work towards is this multi-chain future where, we will be creating Void, but we'd want to see more AVMs. We want to see other networks having their own industry that they are focusing on. And they can obviously have a comparative advantage and be able to serve the market that they're focusing on far more effectively than us or anyone else could. But then when you think of them all, say you've got 5 of these different networks all taking this approach, you can kind of bundle them all together into a sort of customs union sort of scenario, if you will, where obviously they're able to have this common market and be able to leverage each other to be far more efficient and far more effective. But additionally, they can then serve other ecosystems external, even from the AVM. There could be a sort of EVM L1s that are able to then tap into the goods and services being provided over in our ecosystem. So I think for me, that's probably one of the more fundamental things that needs to happen in the industry as a whole. And that's something that we are going to be working towards. And I think that is really something that really desperately needs to happen before we can even start thinking about some of these narratives of onboarding the next 1 billion, right? Um, there are great examples of apps that can right now serve mainstream users, but I don't believe that the majority of cases that is a choice or an option, really. So for me, it is really just building out this fundamental infrastructure piece that's still needed to then sort of building these different layers in the economy to then more effectively serve the mainstream market. I think that's something that we're going to be heavily focusing on, and I'd love to see that sort of be spread out, if you will, across the wider ecosystem of Web3.
Amazing, sir. I just want to say hello to Super Synapses. I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day as well, sir. Um,
Good morning.
Realistically, how long do you think it'll take to make Voy EVM compatible?
Yeah, I think for Voy to be EVM compatible, and the idea being that we do want to modularize a lot of the stack that does exist. So you can sort of bring your own VM. It could be EVM, it could be SVM, it could be, goodness knows what else is coming. And I think it's important to remain flexible in that way. Honestly, it's probably going to be minimum a couple of years out. That kind of sort of build is quite the technical undertaking. Right now, the focus for us is obviously bootstrapping the initial network and the ecosystem and the community, and then actually starting to scale by getting more liquidity in, getting more projects in, and actually really building out a place where people want to be. People want to have fun. They're part of a community that they are actually sort of contributing towards this ecosystem and taking ownership of it and actually being able to govern it too. I feel like before we even get on to extending the technology, we really need to focus on actually making this something that is built, owned, and run by the community. We are big believers in the technology that we use, but we don't believe that is necessarily the store of value or what is the store of value at all within the network. It's the people, it's the community. And so we really need to start there and actually start growing as an ecosystem and onboarding more users who can actually come in and build or can run nodes or can just be sort of using the applications. And then we can start looking towards actually adapting the technology and making the changes necessary to continue to grow outwards again, because we will reach a saturation point where we then need to start making these changes to actually tap into other ecosystems too. So I'd say definitely at least a couple of years to get to that point.
Makes sense, because we want to make sure we do it right and it's done properly. So yeah, that makes sense. But
Yeah,
exciting
it would
stuff,
require
nevertheless.
like raising huge quantities of cash, which at the end of the day would reduce the allocation that can actually go to the community themselves. So, I do see it as a very important thing, but not to the detriment of what we're actually trying to build here.
Totally makes sense. And something could take time, but it's a great mission to have either
We
way.
got time. We got time.
No, we got time. All right. So I got another question here. Who is your favorite Voy community member?
It's a loaded question. There's so many, honestly. I don't know if I could possibly pick one. There's honestly about 50 that I could pick, which could be up there really. There's so many people. That is a very unfair question, Cody. It's interesting. I suppose I don't know. I
Let's just say they always put a smile on your face. You're happy, you're always happy to see him there. I wouldn't say it's your favorite, but one you really enjoy being around.
again, so many for different reasons. Honestly, if I had to pick a few, there's every time I talk to Shelly, honestly, that's an enjoyable experience. He's always building. He's always getting his hands dirty. I knew him before Voy as well, and it's great to see him having the success that he is having. I see Kieran as well, and another builder that is just really taken this and run with it, and what he's created with Kabisis is incredible. I might be slightly biased, but I honestly think it's probably one of the best looking wallets I've actually seen And I can't wait for them to get the mobile version out as well, which is incredibly crazy, just the turnaround time, to be honest. But as well as that, like, people like Taco brings this energy with him, which is palpable and I've not seen before, but I just love it every time he gets up on a Spaces. Additionally, people like Wilder being in the governance and the council, it was great to see the governors sort of thriving within that sort of battleground of sort of testnet governance and really giving us lessons to learn from and taking that experience and sort of feeding it into this next iteration that we're going to be releasing soon. Honestly, yeah, just off the top of my head, those are just a few, but I could keep going on. There's obviously Mitch and Os building as well. And I mean, so many different people, Haroof as well, with what he did with the Dorks, the very first NFT collection. Impossible not to mention him. He always makes me laugh. Great to meet him in person, actually. Funny enough as well, Scotty, I'd be very amiss if I didn't mention him. It's funny because I actually met him for the first time last year in, is it Consensus? I want to say it's Consensus, the one in Austin. Yeah.
It has to be because he lives there.
Yeah, it would be that one. I think he's going again this year. It was really great meeting him a year ago and just seeing him really kind of just, run with this and being in the community and just being down in the trenches and getting dirty, really. It's always funny seeing him. And again, very rarely I'll be able to catch sort of the end of a late night Spaces in the US, and he's always there. The two times it's happened, he's been there. So it's always great to see. But again, there's just so many people. Honestly, Cody, I could not name just a single person, and I'm sure there's people I've missed off when I've been rattling through a couple people. And it's just crazy what this community has become in such a short amount of time.
It's okay. Chris said that question was hard too. So you did good. You did good. All right.
It's impossible to answer. It's impossible to answer.
What kind of dApps would you like to see on Voy? Like, what are some interesting things you'd like to see, like the community just come out and build themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I think for me, I kind of like to segment the economy off an ecosystem into, well, 5 main parts. So the network underpinning everything already been done. That's great. That's fantastic. So really that just leaves the public infrastructure, public goods and services, the private infrastructure, monetizable goods and services, and then in my eyes, platforms, and then finally applications. And obviously each layer leveraging the one below it to then serve their specific market and their specific user and customer. And I think, at the end of the day, it'd be great to have a killer app that can serve mainstream users. I think they are few and far between, just given where the industry is in general. So honestly, I'd love to see more public and private infrastructure, more really core critical pieces of infrastructure that are needed to actually support those higher levels up the stack, like the platforms and the applications. But to that point as well, I think there are some really, really great platforms that can be built, which can be leveraged not necessarily just by mainstream users, but by people in the community and the ecosystem as well. And again, I think it's these kinds of sort of platforms that can end up exporting their goods and services to other ecosystems. But I'd love to see some kind of decentralized ID stuff, memberships, loyalty points, event ticketing type platforms, which can then be integrated into mainstream applications. And I think if we get to that point where existing mainstream applications can implement these sort of features and the services provided by these platforms, that would be really interesting. And obviously it'd be in a way that it completely abstracts away the cost and the risk and the complexity of blockchain itself. But right now, definitely the infrastructure pieces, I think. That's great to see. I want to see more standards being created as well, to increase the interoperability, not just within the different layers, but between them, and be able to actually implement existing standards externally too. I think that's going to be really exciting. But I couldn't honestly put my finger on a particular type of dApp that would be great to see, because we already have a lot of these core pieces, like the DEXs, the marketplaces, the launch pads. We were already coming out of the gate with them. So I would maybe like to see some of the more, sort of niche or more quirky aspects of those, maybe sort of lending protocols and things like this, which can help underpin the DeFi ecosystem. Maybe a perpetuals market would be great to see. Some stable tokens would be great to see, whether algorithmic or not. I'm not fussed, but it's definitely a long way to go in terms of what's needed, but definitely going to be focusing more on the infrastructure pieces. So we do have a solid foundation to grow from.
Makes sense. All right, we got a question here from the audience. If you could dream up a crazy use case for Vori being used in the masses in Web 4, what would it be? Not
Web
even
4?
Web 4. We're already jumping on the new web, bro.
We're transcending Web 3. Okay, I've seen people use Web 4 before as like a combination of 2 and 3, but I'll assume that it was maybe a typo. Honestly, for us, it's the community infrastructure market. I think what I would love to see is not Voi necessarily, but the projects in the ecosystem of Voi being implemented into mainstream apps that are sort of serving communities. So obviously we would be this infrastructure piece that they can leverage. And it means that there's this kind of shared data layer really for a lot of these different communities where they can retain the ownership. And, say you're a community that just starts out, there might be specific applications that you're using right now, but you end up kind of getting locked to them and being unable to actually escape and go elsewhere because that platform owns their data. But it'd be great if these applications can instead leverage what is being built in Voi, such that the users and the communities themselves do own that data and they could move around and use different applications without losing access to everything, whether it's their assets or their data or whatever it might be. So I think for me, the real crazy idea, what I would love to see would be some kind of probably something like Amex, really, where there is loyalty points baked in, but it just happens to be leveraging the infrastructure that's built on Voi, right? We don't want to be Amex, but we would love to be able to support maybe a new Web3 payment something, or even a traditional one with card or cash or however it might be, or even bank transfers that can then bolt on loyalty points, which and obviously the loyalty point platform would be built by third parties in the ecosystem, and it's them serving them. So I'd love to see that. But again, like in conjunction with memberships as well, and maybe some sort of decentralized identity software too. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, some DID stuff would be really cool. Especially some well-done stuff. All right.
I think memberships is such low-hanging fruit in general, to be honest, both in Web3 and externally.
All right. Next question I got for you here is, can you explain Voi ID like I am 5? And what kind of development hurdles does Web3 as a whole need to, or what kind of development hurdles will it need to go through?
Yeah, got you. So Voi ID at its core is a way to actually abstract away a lot of the complexities of blockchain within applications. So really think of it as a way to delegate wallets. So it's kind of abstraction, like wallet abstraction, but not just that, also signing abstraction. So actually doing away with the requirement for a user to sign every single transaction that comes their way. So while maintaining this ability to have self-custody, but giving the user the option of how they want to do their security. So they could do email password, they could do key passes, they could do fingerprints, biometrics, or just keep using a seed phrase if they really wanted to, right? I think the choice should be up to them on how they want to secure their accounts. But the point is to enable applications to gain access to the benefits of Web3 without exposing their own users and customers to the risk and complexity. And so it worked by essentially enabling us to have these accounts connected to the applications themselves, but also the users. And the user able to give permission through logic signatures such that we could then create, or the application itself could create transactions on behalf of them and have them automatically signed, so the user isn't there having to click confirm every single time something pops up. And I do believe that logic signatures are an extremely powerful feature that hasn't really been tapped into yet. And I think this would be a great use case for it, to be honest. And I think this would be a great thing. There's a lot of different projects tackling account abstraction. And I think it's just so very necessary for, say, again, coming back to that earlier example of the layers in the ecosystem, for platforms to actually provide their services to existing Web 2 applications. You don't want to be a Web 2 application implementing, say, NFT memberships, but then having to then expose their user to these extra hurdles. They're just not going to do it. The moment you add in an extra point of friction, it's just a no-brainer for them to say no. So it's really just giving people a Web 2 experience, but in a way that they actually get to tap into the benefits of Web 3.
All right. Sounds like some exciting stuff. And I realized why that question was phrased weird because it was kind of blended in with my next question here. And well, what kind of development hurdles does Web3 as a whole need to overcome before we can actually become like mainstream? Like, like people are actually using it and not realize they're using it in a sense.
Yeah, honestly, it comes down to that. I think we need to get to a point where nobody needs to know or care that they're using blockchain. People shouldn't need to know or care they're using blockchain. It's fundamentally a piece of infrastructure for a lot of different applications and for users. I shouldn't need to know that I have, people like the applications themselves that the users and the mainstream users are using shouldn't even need to know what network that they're getting these goods and services from. And it could be a combination of different networks, right? So I think there's a hell of a lot that needs to be done at the more fundamental infrastructure based level, where you could have the ability for an application to bundle in a lot of different goods and services from different networks and different ecosystems, but in a way that is not technically complex for them, but then additionally in a way that is not overburdening, it's not complex or like risky for the end users. Maybe that's an app store, some kind of Web3 app store that just sort of aggregates all of the different projects and services and platforms that can be sort of exported from the different ecosystems, and projects can come along and just pick them up and plug them in and play. I think the earnest or the issue isn't on trying to get mainstream users to use Web3, is trying to get the applications to implement it such that normal mainstream users don't know they are using it. And I really think that's the big barrier. And I think maybe, sometimes we're looking at it from the wrong way around when we're focusing exclusively just on things like just wallets, And again, it's to this point where I just think there's a lot of missing critical infrastructure that will connect up a lot of these different sort of sparse ecosystems.
Makes sense. Okay. And the next question I got for you here is, what are like some features some of these dApps need to help drive in, like some of our current ecosystem dApps need to help drive in more users, like native Web3 users?
Got you. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I think again, like the projects that we have right now are absolutely fantastic, and they are like core critical pieces of infrastructure that's necessary. You need a DEX. You need two DEXs so there can be arbitrage between them. You need wallets. You need marketplaces. You need launch pads, and you need developer tools as well. And I don't think there's necessarily any additional features per se that these existing projects need to implement. I think it's more about new projects coming in and layering on top of them. These guys have kind of set the foundation, set this base level that is needed to actually be an ecosystem. And now what is needed is new projects to come in and leverage them. So in a lot of ways, for say the Nomadex or Humble, their customers are other projects that are going to leverage them for the goods and services that they're providing. And I think in order to get new users into the ecosystem, there needs to be more fun, probably, applications that need to be out there. Basically, I think there needs to be more interesting things to do, probably more things like that. Where I don't think it's necessary features that are missing from these ones right now, but more the need for either existing developers to build them, or for new developers to come in, or for existing projects to come over, whatever it might be. I think there just needs to be more projects is really what it comes down to. And of course, more liquidity as well certainly doesn't help.
Both of those are great things to have. So yes. Do you know if any of these void dApps plan to have like a token once we go to mainnet?
Yeah, I was debating talking about that actually in the last question. I've heard whispers. I know there are certain projects that do want to launch certain tokens. I won't say which ones, but I would love to see pretty much every project have a token if it's possible. I do think that is important for a number of different reasons. But I can't say that concretely that there are any specific projects that are launching a token as of yet. But I do believe that there will be more come we get closer to mainnet and beyond. But on top of that, we'd love to see some meme tokens as well, like community tokens. Some of the NFT collections, I think they are very well primed to create their own tokens as well. And yeah, I would love to see it, to be honest.
Yeah, if not, we can keep hodling Taco Coin till then.
Yeah, or the Good Morning token, I believe. That
uh,
one as well was doing the rounds.
yeah, we got the GM token. That's correct. That's correct. And also, you guys don't forget, you can ask Benny questions as well too. I'm not the only one that needs to ask some questions, or Yanni as well. So if you guys have any questions for Benny here, don't be afraid to ask. And I guess I got another question I got here is like, what is like the first like development job you ever had, Benny? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Uh,
the first ever, like the one I actually got paid money to do.
hmm
That was yeah, back at JP Morgan. Wow. It was funny enough, it wasn't, it was like, it was more environment management actually. So maintaining the UAT, the QA, the production, the DR, the disaster recovery environments, which the applications would run in. It was actually more maintaining them. So there's quite a lot of scripting and CI/CD. Honestly, I didn't enjoy it that much. I actually ended up moving teams to join one of my mates who was in a separate team it was the same department. It was still CIB, so corporate investment banking, but working on the global payment system. So that was actually a lot more interesting, to be honest. No hate for anyone that does do environment management. It's super important. It's just not my cup of tea. I much prefer to be actually running code. And that was great fun. It was working in an actual agile team, picking up tickets, delivering features, and goodness knows what every week and every 2 weeks. But yeah, that was really good fun. And then we ended up actually as a team earning a patent for it as well. It was funnily quite architecturally similar to blockchain in a lot of ways. It wasn't distributed or decentralized. Actually, no, it was distributed, but it wasn't decentralized, and it was basically event sourcing. So very similar to blockchain, where it's just appending transactions to get a final state. The traditional way was just to have a snapshot, which you'd receive the transaction and then update it. This was just purely just transactions, just nothing else. And then obviously it meant that you have a great audit trail, much like with blockchain. You could just be like, right, at this point in time, what was the balance? But you could always rebuild it by obviously appending all of these transactions together. So that was probably my first proper development job. It was using Java, which was great. It's probably the language I ended up using the most, actually. But yeah, that was it, to be honest. JP Morgan down in Bournemouth in their tech center, working on the global payment system.
Nice. All right. Got someone here that asked something. I feel like Voy is still not mobile friendly. There is still a very large part of the Web3 community that are buried or barred from joining in. Is there something that is important for the team to reach sooner than later?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very, very good point. And it's funny when we look at our analytics on Discord. The amount of people using mobile is actually quite huge. It's definitely the way to go. And I think right now the main thing that is missing is the mobile wallet, to be honest, because at that point it does become a lot easier to interact with the D apps. And honestly, that I don't want to keep dropping it on them, but last I checked, it was probably only about a month or two away, at least some kind of early prototype or at least an MVP, which would enable people to obviously create accounts, import accounts, send transactions, connect sessions, and all this kind of good stuff. So honestly, probably within the next couple of months, I'd love to have it before we hit mainnet. So I don't see why that's not possible at this point. And I think they might even be, correct me if I'm wrong, Cody, but I think they might be dropping some alpha about exactly that in an upcoming interview you might be doing.
There might be there might be some prototypes. You never know. We
Mm.
might be hitting some stuff real soon. So I just say stay tuned and join every live stream that we do. As the key advice I would say there.
Yeah, there's so much happening at any one time. It's actually kind of crazy. Just even thinking about a year ago and how far the ecosystem has come, it's absolutely insane. So yeah, there's things being worked on every single day. There's new. Honestly, it's impossible to keep up with it sometimes. So I'm actually quite glad you're doing these sessions with the builders where they can actually have a platform to just actually announce all these things. Because yeah, the features and updates are coming out thick and fast. That's for sure.
All right, we got our last question here, and then we're going to end it from Super Synapse. Is there any info on how governance will work when mainnet hits? Any info how we can/will interface with the Foundation for Grants, both Phase 2 and mainnet?
Yeah, no, great question as always, Super Synapse. I hope you're doing well. Yeah, honestly, there was an announcement by the foundation. I don't know, Cody, if you can drop a link on the Twitter space, outlining what the governance process is going to look like. So to really kind of just go through it at a high level, there's essentially going to be three branches to the government. It's going to be very much like a tripartite system, which you see obviously in the US, UK, South Korea, and elsewhere. There's probably at least 50 plus different implementations of it. But obviously ours is going to be slightly tweaked and tailored towards blockchain. And obviously that means we're going to have a judicial branch, we're going to have a legislative branch, and we're going to have an executive branch. The community itself is going to be the one elected into positions or appointed in some cases as well. We'll have probably a bit of a mix, kind of like the UK, into the legislative branch. And in this way, it means what the legislative branch is, i.e. the community is actually proposing policies and laws, essentially, which is then actually executed on by the executive branch. And obviously, you have the judicial branch to ensure that any of the policies are not infringing on the initial constitution, and then also ensuring that the execution on those policies is not detrimental to the ecosystem or infringing on the constitution too. So 100%, there's going to be a lot of different grassroots ways to get involved. There's going to be committees within the different sort of economic layers that I kind of outlined earlier. There's already ones right now for the builders. There's already ones for the sort of network, if you will. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the community to actually vote on and sort of decide on the outcomes of a lot of these things. So yeah, to run through at a really high level, it's going to be a tripart system with those three sort of branches of government. And I'm really excited to see that play out, to be honest, because I don't think I've ever seen it implemented in this way. And I don't think I've ever seen a way or an ecosystem where the community has such a voice and such an influence over the direction and decisions, as long as, of course, it is adhering to the Constitution, right? Very similar to a country. And I very much like to look at a blockchain ecosystem as a country. I think there's an insane number of parallels to draw between the two. Obviously, it's kind of like a subset of a lot of the different aspects, but that just makes it even easier to sort of look at, to be honest. So yeah, it's a great question. I definitely would encourage you to read the article to get a bit more detail. But at a high level, that's really what it's going to look like.
He has one more question. I guess we'll end that as a follow-up question. Any info on how the grant process currently does or will work?
Yeah, no, great question. Honestly, it's still being fleshed out, to be honest, but I can't imagine it's going to deviate too much from what we saw in testnet. At the end of the day, this was partly why we did the testnet council, was to battle, test, and actually trial a lot of these different processes. And I can't imagine it's going to deviate too much from that. I think one thing that is for sure is it's going to be outcome based. So, the whole aspect being, you will earn tokens for adding value to the ecosystem, like truly adding value. And of course, these can be retroactive grants as well. If you've built something and it's blown up way more than you were expecting, so you never bothered to apply, you can still apply for a grant. Like the whole point is that if you are adding value, you can get tokens for it essentially. So really, it's going to work probably very, very similar to what we've seen in the past. But obviously, don't take that as fact. It could change between now and then, but I can't imagine that it would change too much. I'm sure there'll be some nuances and some extra tweaks here or there, but ultimately, it's going to be up to people to make proposals. The community can comment on it. And obviously, there would be a decision as to whether or not the grant gets accepted and goes ahead.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much answers everything. I left the link to the Medium article for him to, do his research on. And I appreciate your time today, and I appreciate everyone's time for tuning in on a nice American holiday today. So I hope everyone has a fantastic Memorial Day. That's in America, and to the rest of the world, I hope it's just another wonderful day. Thank you once again, Benny. Anything you'd like to add as a closing statement for today?
No, I'd just like to thank yourself, Cody, just for organizing this and making it happen. Couldn't be doing this without you. And again, yeah, kind of reiterating your statements. Thanks for everyone for listening to me prattle on, sort of ranting maybe at times. Yeah, really enjoy it. And if anyone does ever want to have a chat or they want to get involved more deeply into the ecosystem, whether you're a developer, a node runner, or just want to be a community member, always feel free to reach out. So yeah, thanks for listening. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy your long weekend.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.